Long before the throne, before the harp's melody echoed through marble halls, before the name of David was sung across the lands of Israel, there was silence. A silence broken only by the wind through forgotten valleys and the breath of one soul, wandering. In the wilderness of shadows, where the stones remembered the footsteps of prophets and angels whispered through cracks in the earth, a young shepherd hid from the wrath of a king. But what he found in hiding was not fear. It was revelation. There are caves in the world where light does not vanish, but transforms, where time bends like flame, and the veil between heaven and earth thins to gossamer. David, chosen but not yet crowned, stumbled into such a place. Beneath the hills of Judah, beyond the reach of men, lay the cave of the soul. It was no ordinary refuge. Within its depths, celestial visions danced on the walls, and the voice of the Eternal stirred the air like thunder wrapped in silk. Beasts unseen by mortal eyes watched from the shadows. Trial by trial, mystery by mystery, the shepherd boy was unmade and remade, not by sword or crown, but by divine encounter. Here begins the journey hidden from the scrolls, a path written not in ink, but in fire. These are the secrets whispered in silence, the truths forged in darkness, the hidden story of the one who would become king. Enter now the cave of the soul. The secrets of David await. Chapter 1. The breath beneath the stones. The sun bled into the hills of Adullam, casting golden shadows upon jagged rocks and twisted olive trees. Dust clung to David's cloak as he stumbled across the barren path, his harp slung over one shoulder, and a sling heavy with memory dangling at his side. Behind him, the world of men raged, Saul's soldiers scouring the land like wolves without mercy. But ahead, only silence and stone. He had not chosen this path. It had called to him. Whispers rode the wind, speaking in no language yet understood in the heart. His feet led him to a cleft in the hill, a narrow mouth yawning open in the rock like the breath of the earth itself. The mouth of the cave beckoned with a strange pull, as though the darkness within recognized the light he carried. David stood at its edge, the last warmth of daylight brushing his face, and felt the hum of something ancient deep below. Then he stepped in. The air changed instantly. The world outside dimmed and fell away. Inside, the cave pulsed with a life of its own, a rhythm beneath the stone, like the heartbeat of a slumbering giant. David lit a small torch, and the flickering flame danced against the walls. But there was more than stone here. Shapes moved just beyond the reach of light. Symbols etched in language older than Hebrew shimmered faintly on the walls, rearranging as he passed, like eyes watching, waiting. He moved deeper. The passage bent and spiraled like the winding of a serpent. Moisture dripped in steady rhythm, echoing through the hollow like a slow chant. And then the air grew warm, not from the torch, but from something else. A breath beneath the stones. David paused. Before him, the cave opened into a vast chamber, round and domed like the inside of a prophet's dream. At the center lay a pool, perfectly still, reflecting not his image, but stars. Stars that did not belong to the sky above, but to some heaven beneath. He approached it, knees weak, heart racing with awe. When he knelt beside the water, the torch dimmed. Darkness did not consume, it revealed. Visions rose from the surface, a city of golden light, a throne of fire, and himself, older, robed, crowned, yet burdened. He saw battles fought not with swords, but with faith. He heard the cry of a lion, not of earth, but of spirit, and the weeping of a nation. A harp string snapped in the vision, and the sound echoed with the pain of betrayal. David fell back, gasping. Then came the voice, not heard with ears, but felt in the marrow of his bones. A voice ancient and terrible, tender and consuming. It said only this: he who would wear the crown must first pass through the soul's shadow. The torch extinguished. The chamber went dark. But David no longer feared. He had seen enough to know that his path would not be carved by men, but by something greater, by trials unseen and truths untold. In the stillness, he whispered a song, not of triumph, but of wonder. And the cave listened. Thus began the forging. Chapter 2. The Watchers in the Deep. Darkness did not end with silence. Within the cave, even shadows had breath. David sat by the pool of stars, torchless, his back against the wall of time. There was no sound but his own heartbeat, steady and deliberate. The visions had ceased, but their aftertaste lingered like incense, sweet, heavy, and haunting. He closed his eyes and listened, not with ears, but with the stillness of his soul. And then he heard it, a whisper, no louder than the hush of wind across dry reeds. It slithered between the rocks, echoing without direction, yet intimate, as though it had been spoken just beside his ear. He sees you. David stood, fingers brushing the hilt of his sling, though no stone would save him from spirits. The pool had gone black, the stars swallowed by some unseen veil. A rumble vibrated through the floor beneath his feet. Not a tremor, but the shifting of something massive and alive, buried in layers of silence and stone. The cave had watchers. At the edge of the chamber, a figure stirred. Its shape shimmered, neither fully beast nor man. It had eyes like molten iron and wings that folded into shadow. Its face bore no mouth, yet it spoke without sound. A guardian of the threshold. David did not flinch. Something in him, a quiet ember, recognized this being not his enemy, but as a test. The figure raised an arm. In its palm, a flame appeared, hovering above the skin like a living thought. The flame flickered, and from it rose images, snapshots of futures not yet born. David saw himself facing giants again. Not Goliath, but ones cloaked in robes, wielding scrolls sharper than spears. He saw betrayals blooming like thorns among roses, saw blood on his hands that had never held a blade. Then the flame vanished. The watcher stepped aside, revealing a narrow passage carved by something older than time. David hesitated, not out of fear, but reverence. He understood now. This cave was not merely a hiding place. It was a crucible. Each step forward burned away a piece of the boy, so that the man might emerge. He entered the passage. The walls grew tighter, forcing him to stoop. Strange glyphs pulsed on the stone, glowing faintly with hues unseen in the outer world. Colors that spoke emotion instead of tone. Sorrow, awe, and judgment. David ran his fingers along them, feeling warmth where there should have been chill. He emerged into a chamber smaller, but more vibrant. It hummed with unseen presence. In the center floated a harp, his harp, but made of crystal and light. It rotated slowly, untouched by air, its strings resonating with no hand. When David approached, a single note rang out, piercing the silence like a bell over water. A memory flooded him. He was once a boy beneath the stars, tending sheep and singing to no one. But not alone. He remembered the lion, the bear, and the invisible hand that had steadied his aim. That same hand, it seemed, now orchestrated this journey. From the walls, figures began to emerge, not flesh, but memory given shape. Samuel the prophet, his eyes fierce with divine fire. Jonathan, his brother of soul, smiling in a moment of peace. Even Saul appeared, his face torn between wrath and sorrow. They said nothing, only watched. David dropped to his knees. "Why me?" he whispered, his voice breaking the spell. And the cave answered, not with thunder, but with a soft, echoing voice. "Because you asked not to be king. But you listened." Tears slipped from David's eyes, hot and silent. He understood now. The cave of the soul did not demand strength. It demanded surrender, not to fear, nor to power, but to truth. The deeper he journeyed, the more he would be undone. And in that undoing, the crown would be forged. As he rose, the watchers faded. The harp dissolved into a mist of golden light, and the path ahead opened once more. The cave was not finished with him, but he was no longer the same. Chapter 3. The Veil of Flame. The passage ahead descended in a slow spiral, narrowing with each step. David's fingers brushed against damp stone etched with unfamiliar patterns, runes that shifted as he walked, flickering in and out of existence like dying fireflies. The cave no longer felt like Earth. It breathed with a different rhythm now, deeper, more ancient. The air itself shimmered, thick with an invisible tension. And then he saw it, a curtain of fire. It stretched from wall to wall, floor to ceiling, dancing without smoke or heat, yet pulsing with such intensity that the rock around it seemed to retreat. The flames were not orange or red, but hues of pure essence, blue as deep sorrow, white as holy silence, gold as unspoken glory. This was no natural blaze. It was alive. David stepped forward, and the fire responded. It flickered outward, reaching for him, but stopped just shy of his skin. He felt nothing. No burn, no warmth, just the raw awareness of being known. Every thought, every hidden thing inside him stirred under its gaze. Behind a veil, a shape moved. A figure, robed in shifting light, stood beyond the flames. Its face was veiled, its hands raised, not in warning, but invitation. The voice came again, not external, but blooming within David's chest like thunder caught in a whisper. To pass through fire is not to perish, but to remember. David's breath caught. He knew what he had to do. He removed his cloak, his sandals, even the sling at his side. He stepped toward the flame, eyes open. As he crossed the threshold, the world vanished. No pain, no sound, just a flood of memory and revelation. He was no longer in the cave. He was back beneath a sky burning with stars, younger, smaller, his father's voice barking orders, his brothers laughing without kindness. The taste of forgotten tears returned to his mouth. He saw himself left behind, overlooked, the least of Jesse's sons. But in the shadows of that memory, another presence had watched him, a presence that saw what others could not. The vision shifted. He stood again before Samuel, oil dripping from his brow, the prophet's gaze fixed and piercing. But now David saw what had been hidden then, the trembling in the old man's hand, the weight behind his eyes. Samuel had not anointed a hero. He had unleashed a storm. Another vision, the court of Saul, music flowing from David's harp, the king's eyes empty and haunted. David saw not just madness in Saul, but fear. Fear of the very light that dwelled within him. And then the spear, the fury. David relived it, not with terror, but with clarity. He had been forged in the fire of another man's downfall. And then Abigail, her words echoed again, wise and sharp. The Lord will build a lasting house for you, because you fight the battles of the Lord. These memories came not to haunt, but to teach. The fire faded. David collapsed to his knees, the stone beneath him cool once more. He gasped, his body trembling, his soul stripped bare. Across his skin, faint markings glowed, symbols etched by flame, now cooling into scars of light. They were not wounds, but seals, evidence of passage. Ahead, the chamber opened into a wide gallery. The walls were covered in mirrors, not of glass, but of polished stone, so smooth they captured more than reflection. Each surface showed a different version of David, a warrior bathed in blood, a king weeping on a rooftop, an old man with eyes turned toward heaven. Each version watched him, unblinking. David stepped past them. He now understood that the crown was not a reward, but a burden forged in secret fires. And those who would wear it must carry not only victory, but memory. At the far end of the gallery, a door waited, not made of wood or stone, but of woven light. It pulsed gently, like the beat of a patient heart. He reached for it, knowing that each step forward was a step deeper into the mystery of who he must become. The cave did not resist. It welcomed him, and somewhere in the distance, a new melody began, a song unplayed, yet waiting in the strings of his soul. Chapter 4. The Guardians of the Threshold. David's hand hesitated on the door of woven light. It pulsed softly beneath his palm, alive like the heartbeat of the cave itself. This was no ordinary barrier, but a threshold between worlds, between the shadow of the boy he was and the brilliance of the king he must become. With a steady breath, he pushed forward. The door gave way without resistance. revealing a vast hall that seemed carved from crystal and shadow. Light fractured endlessly across the walls, painting rainbows on the floor, yet the air was cool and thick with mystery. Here, time itself felt suspended, as if the moments inside held the weight of eternity. At the far end of the hall stood figures tall and still, their forms cloaked in mist and armor woven from starlight. These were the guardians of the threshold, beings neither fully spirit nor flesh, ancient sentinels bound to the cave by a covenant older than kingdoms. Their eyes glowed like embers, and their voices, when they spoke, resonated like the ringing of celestial bells. David, one intoned, you stand before the gate of destiny. To pass, you must prove yourself not by sword, but by soul. David's heart clenched. I am ready, he said, though his voice betrayed the tremor within. What is the trial? The guardians moved as one, stepping forward to reveal 3 ancient relics resting on pedestals, each radiating power and meaning beyond earthly comprehension. The first was a crown forged from twisted thorns and gold, symbolizing sacrifice and suffering. The second, a harp with strings of light, embodying faith and wisdom. The third, a sword glowing faintly with divine fire, representing justice and courage. You must choose, said another guardian, and carry what your soul demands. But beware, each path will shape the man you are to become. There is no turning back. David's gaze flickered between the relics. His mind raced through the memories the cave had shown him, the battles, the betrayals, the silent prayers beneath the stars. Slowly, his hand reached toward the harp. The sword is for warriors who seek conquest, he murmured. The crown is for those who bear the pain of leadership. But I am a song in the dark, a shepherd with a harp. As his fingers touched the strings, a note rang out, clear and pure, vibrating through the hall and awakening something long dormant. The guardians nodded, their faces softening. Then you have chosen rightly, said the eldest among them. Faith will be your shield, and wisdom your sword. Suddenly, the hall trembled, and the crystal walls dissolved into mist. David found himself standing on a rocky precipice overlooking a vast valley bathed in twilight. The air was alive with voices, whispers of the past, prayers of the present, and the echoes of a future yet to come. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in white, an old man with eyes that burned like stars. He stepped forward and spoke, his voice both a comfort and a challenge. To lead a nation is to carry its soul. To bear a crown is to carry its burdens. The path will be lonely and the price great. But remember this, those who walk with God never walk alone. David bowed his head, the weight of the words sinking deep into his heart. The cave's secrets were not merely tests of strength or courage. They were lessons in humility, faith, and the quiet power of the soul. As the first stars began to pierce the twilight sky, David turned from the precipice, the harp's melody echoing in his mind. The journey through the cave was far from over, but he felt something new stirring within, a fire not of flame, but of purpose. He stepped forward into the night, ready to face the trials that awaited beyond the veil. Chapter 5. The Echoes of the Past. David walked away from the precipice with the harp's melody ringing softly in his heart. The cave behind him seemed to breathe, its stone walls pulsing with ancient secrets. He was no longer a boy hiding from the world, but a man slowly uncovering the weight of destiny. The path led downward into a winding corridor where shadows danced like living things. Each step echoed not only in the cave, but inside David's soul, stirring memories he had long buried beneath layers of prayer and duty. Suddenly, the passage opened into a vast chamber filled with countless mirrors. But these were no ordinary reflections. Each surface showed a fragment of history, not only his own, but that of Israel itself. David's eyes scanned the images, the shepherd boy fighting lions and bears, the anointing by Samuel, the fierce battles against enemies both seen and unseen. One mirror shimmered and revealed a vision of Saul, the first king, standing alone atop a hill, his face twisted in desperation and rage. The air around Saul was thick with dark shadows, his crown heavy and jagged, like a thorned crown of sorrow. David felt a pang of sorrow for the fallen king, realizing that power without wisdom led only to ruin. Another mirror showed Jonathan, Saul's son and David's closest friend, smiling in a moment of peace before the storm of war shattered their world. The bond between them radiated warmth and loyalty, a rare light in a land consumed by strife. As David watched, the chamber began to fill with voices, whispers carried on a wind only he could hear. They spoke of courage, betrayal, forgiveness, and hope. The voices were the echoes of those who had walked the path before him, urging him onward. Then the chamber darkened. A cold wind swept through, extinguishing the flickering lights. David felt a presence behind him, a shadow moving with the weight of centuries. He turned slowly, heart pounding. A figure stepped forward from the darkness, cloaked in black and silver. Its eyes glowed with a fierce intelligence, and its voice was both a warning and a challenge. David, it said, to lead a people is to face not only their enemies, but their own fears and doubts. The crown you seek is forged in fire and sorrow. Are you prepared to bear its burden? David met the gaze unflinchingly. I do not seek the crown for power or glory. I seek it to serve, to protect, and to bring hope. The figure nodded slowly. Then you must face the trial of shadows. Only by confronting the darkness within can you lead with light. The chamber transformed. The mirrors shattered into 1,000 shards of glass and shadow, swirling around David like a storm. Images of his failures, fears, and regrets assaulted him. Faces of those he could not save, mistakes that haunted his conscience. But amidst the chaos, a voice rose, steady and sure. It was his own, strengthened by faith and resolve. You are not alone, the voice said. The Lord walks with you, even in the darkest valley. David raised his hands, and the shards of glass slowed, then dissolved into sparks of light. The shadows fled before the dawn of his courage. When the storm passed, the chamber was still and silent. David stood tall, marked by the trial but unbroken. A path opened before him, leading deeper into the cave's heart. With each step, he felt the weight of his destiny more keenly, but also the strength to carry it. The secrets of the cave were not simply tests. They were lessons in the art of kingship, forged in the crucible of soul and spirit. The journey was far from over. Ahead lay trials yet unseen, but David was no longer afraid. He was becoming the man the Lord had chosen, steadfast, wise, and true. Chapter 6. The Whispering Stones. The path before David narrowed into a corridor lined with ancient stones carved deep with cryptic symbols. The air was cool and carried a faint hum, as if the very earth whispered secrets long forgotten. Each step David took echoed softly, blending with the murmurs around him, voices of the past, urging him onward or warning him away. His fingers traced the cold stone walls, feeling the rough grooves etched by hands long turned to dust. These stones were the bones of the cave, holding the memories of generations, and tonight they spoke to him with clarity. Listen, a voice whispered, not through the air but inside his mind. Know the burden you carry, King of Israel. David halted. The voice was neither threatening nor gentle. It was certain, like the voice of fate itself. He closed his eyes and let the words settle deep within. The stones began to glow faintly, their symbols lighting the passage with a pale blue light. David's breath caught as the walls shifted, revealing hidden alcoves where ancient scrolls and relics rested untouched. Among them, he found a small, worn tablet inscribed with verses that shimmered in the ethereal light. He read aloud softly, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters." A calm settled over him, a balm against the storms of the journey. Yet the cave was far from finished. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath his feet, and the walls seemed to breathe. Shadows lengthened, and from the depths emerged spectral figures, guardians of the sacred knowledge. They bore the faces of the prophets, their eyes glowing with divine fire. David, one spoke, voice echoing like thunder. The path to kingship is not paved with triumph alone. You must face the trials of spirit and flesh, the torment of doubt and the test of faith. The others raised their hands, revealing visions of David's future, battles against giants, moments of betrayal, nights of solitary prayer. Each vision was a shard of the soul's journey, raw and unyielding. You carry the hopes of a nation, yet the weight threatens to crush you, another said. How will you endure when the world turns against you? David's heart pounded, but his resolve did not waver. With God as my shield, I will stand. I will not falter, no matter the darkness. A hush fell. The spirits nodded, their forms dissolving into the mist. The stones glowed one final time, then faded to silence. Ahead, a new passage opened, bathed in soft golden light. David stepped forward, feeling the stirrings of strength within. The cave was no longer just a place of trials. It was becoming the forge where a king was shaped. And as he walked, the whispering stones fell silent, their secrets entrusted to the soul who dared to listen. Chapter 7. The Veil of Visions. As David ventured deeper into the labyrinthine heart of the cave, the air grew thick with an unearthly mist. It curled around his ankles, swirling like a living thing, and the faint glow of phosphorescent stones cast eerie shadows on the walls. Here, the veil between the mortal realm and the divine grew thin, and the whispers of the unseen brushed against his spirit. Ahead, a curtain of shimmering light hung, suspended, like a veil woven from threads of starlight and shadow. David stepped forward, feeling the cool tendrils brush his skin, and passed through the veil into a vast chamber unlike any he had seen before. The space stretched endlessly in every direction, bathed in twilight hues that shifted and danced like flames. The ground beneath him was smooth glass, reflecting a sky filled with constellations unknown to earthly charts. Around the edges of the chamber, shadows flickered, forms half seen and half imagined, the spirits of those who had walked before, watching, waiting. In the center of this cosmic cathedral stood an ancient altar of stone, carved with symbols of power and prophecy. Upon it lay a crystal orb, swirling with mist and light, a window into the hidden future. David approached, his heart pounding. As his fingers brushed the orb's surface, visions flooded his mind. He saw the kingdom of Israel, vast and prosperous, yet riddled with strife. He witnessed battles waged beneath blood-red skies, heroes rising and falling, allies betraying one another in shadows. The faces of those he loved appeared and faded. Jonathan's loyal smile, Michael's fierce devotion, and the resolute gaze of his mother. Then the visions darkened, showing the pain of exile, the betrayal of friends, and the loneliness of a king hunted by enemies, both mortal and spiritual. Yet amid the despair, flickers of hope burned brightly. Promises whispered by prophets, the covenant of a kingdom under God's guidance. David's breath caught as a voice echoed within the chamber, soft but clear. The future is a tapestry woven by choice and faith. To lead is to embrace both light and shadow. A figure stepped from the shadows, a woman clothed in robes of silver and sapphire, her eyes glowing like stars. She was the seeress of the cave, guardian of destiny's secrets. "You have glimpsed what may come," she said. "But remember, the path is not fixed. Each step you take can change the pattern of fate." David nodded, the weight of the visions settling deep within his soul. The cave was teaching him that kingship was more than power. It was the courage to face uncertainty, the wisdom to choose rightly, and the faith to endure. The seeress smiled gently and waved her hand. The orb's light dimmed, and the chamber faded into mist once more. David stepped back through the veil, feeling the cave close behind him like the closing of a great book. The lessons of the vision lingered, etched into his spirit, guiding him toward the throne he was destined to claim. With renewed determination, he pressed onward. The trials were far from over, but the soul of a king burned brighter with every step. Chapter 8. The Trial of the Spirit Beast. David's journey through the cave brought him to a vast chamber whose walls pulsed with a soft, otherworldly glow. The air was heavy with anticipation, as if the very atmosphere awaited the arrival of a challenge destined to test the core of his being. At the center stood a creature unlike any David had ever seen, a majestic beast forged of shadow and light, with eyes that burned like molten gold. Its form was fluid, shifting between lion, eagle, and serpent, embodying power, wisdom, and cunning all at once. This was the spirit beast, guardian of the soul's deepest trials. The beast's voice resonated within the chamber, a blend of thunder and whisper. David, bearer of the harp and seeker of truth, you stand before the trial of the spirit beast. To pass, you must confront the fears and doubts that dwell within your heart. David steadied his breath, feeling the weight of the beast's gaze upon him. I am ready, he declared, his voice firm though his heart trembled beneath the surface. I will face whatever darkness you bring. With a sudden roar, the beast lunged, not with claws, but with visions that struck David's mind like bolts of lightning. He was thrust into memories of failure, the cries of the widow he could not comfort, the betrayal of friends who turned against him, the nights of despair when doubt nearly consumed his soul. Shadows of doubt wrapped around him, whispering that he was unworthy, that the crown was a burden too great to bear. But amid the tempest, David heard another voice, calm, steady, unwavering. It was the voice of faith, reminding him of the Lord's promise, the shepherd's rod and staff that had guided him through darkness before. Summoning his inner strength, David faced the visions head-on, calling forth the melodies of his harp. The notes rang clear and true, weaving a tapestry of light that shattered the shadows. The spirit beast's form shimmered, its eyes glowing with approval. You have faced the darkness and refused to be consumed. The strength of your spirit is true. The beast bowed its head, and from its heart emerged a radiant crystal, pulsing with divine energy. This is your reward, the beast said, a token of the soul's victory, to remind you that courage and faith will guide you through the darkest nights. David took the crystal, feeling warmth and power surge through him. The cave seemed to breathe with newfound life, and the path ahead glowed with promise. As he stepped forward, the chamber dissolved into light, and David knew that each trial was forging him anew, transforming the shepherd boy into the king destined to lead a nation. Chapter 9. The Song of the Ancients. David stepped away from the chamber where the spirit beast had tested his soul, the radiant crystal still warm against his chest. The winding tunnels of the cave stretched before him like serpents coiled in shadow, beckoning him deeper into their secrets. Each step echoed softly, a steady rhythm in the silence, as if the very heart of the earth beat in time with his own. A distant sound began to rise, a melody so faint it might have been the whisper of the wind, yet it grew steadily into a symphony of voices that transcended time and space. The song of the ancients, carried on a breath of divine memory, echoed through the cavern like the call of 1,000 unseen souls. Drawn toward the source, David entered a vast cavern adorned with glowing runes and intricate carvings that shimmered with an otherworldly light. The walls were alive with images, prophets wrapped in robes of fire, warriors brandishing swords that blazed with holy light, kings crowned by heavenly hands. Their silent song wove a tapestry of faith, courage, and sacrifice that spanned generations. David closed his eyes and let the music wash over him. The song spoke of a sacred covenant between the Lord and his people, an unbreakable bond forged through trials and triumphs, through blood and hope. It told of a chosen lineage, a promise that a king would rise to unite the tribes, to build a city of peace where the ark would dwell forever. Visions unfolded before David's mind's eye, a mighty kingdom stretching from desert sands to fertile hills, the hammering of hammers shaping stones for a great temple, the light of torches flickering against golden walls. The faces of his descendants shimmered like stars, kings and prophets, poets and warriors, each bearing the flame of that sacred promise. Yet amid the grandeur, the song whispered of shadows lurking in the hearts of men. It spoke of jealousy that would burn like wildfire, of betrayal's cold blade, and of exile's bitter tears. It warned that the crown would not be won without sacrifice, that the path of the king was paved with sorrow as well as glory. David's heart tightened with the weight of this knowledge, but the melody carried a quiet strength, a reminder that even in the darkest nights, the light of faith could never be extinguished. The Song of the Ancients was a call to courage, a summons to hold fast to hope when the world seemed most uncertain. As the final notes faded into silence, David opened his eyes and bowed his head in reverence. The cave had offered him not only visions of power, but the solemn responsibility that came with it. Kingship was not a prize to be claimed, but a sacred trust to be honored. The glowing runes dimmed, and the cavern's light softened to a gentle glow. David felt the ancient song settle deep within his soul, a beacon to guide him through the trials yet to come. With renewed resolve, he pressed onward through the winding passages. The road to the throne was long and fraught with peril, but the Song of the Ancients gave him strength. He was not alone. In the stillness of the cave, amid echoes of past and future, the shepherd boy who would be king stepped forward, his heart attuned to the timeless melody of faith, courage, and destiny. Chapter 10. The Whispering Shadows. The path through the cave grew narrower, the air cooler and heavier, as if the walls themselves were breathing secrets. David's footsteps echoed faintly against the jagged stone, a rhythmic pulse that steadied his racing heart. The deeper he ventured, the more the veil between worlds thinned, until the shadows around him seemed to murmur with voices not his own. Ahead, the cavern opened into a hollow filled with darkness, so deep it seemed to swallow the very light from his lantern. Yet within this abyss, shapes began to form, whispering shadows that danced at the edge of vision, elusive and haunting. They were echoes of past fears, regrets, and doubts, woven into spectral forms that sought to unravel his resolve. David tightened his grip on the shaft of his spear, drawing strength from the crystal gifted by the spirit beast. The light from it pulsed softly, a beacon of hope against the encroaching gloom. Slowly, he stepped forward into the hollow, his every sense alert to the whispers that brushed against his mind. The shadows swirled, coalescing into phantom figures, faces from his past, moments of failure and loss made manifest. They spoke without words, their silent accusations clawing at his confidence. You are unworthy. You will fall. The crown will slip through your fingers. But David remembered the Song of the Ancients, the promise of faith and courage that bound him to his destiny. He closed his eyes and called upon the strength within, the memories of battles won, friends trusted, and prayers whispered beneath the stars. A soft glow emanated from the crystal, growing brighter until it filled the hollow with radiant light. The shadows shrieked and writhed, their forms dissolving into mist as David's resolve solidified. He spoke aloud, voice steady and commanding, I am the Lord's servant. I will not be broken by fear or doubt. The cavern trembled as the shadows dissipated, leaving only silence and the faint hum of the crystal's light. David exhaled, his spirit tempered like steel forged in the fires of trial. As he moved onward, the cave seemed to open, revealing a narrow passage lined with ancient glyphs, symbols of protection and strength left by those who had walked this path before. With every step, David felt the weight of destiny grow lighter, replaced by the steady flame of hope. Beyond the passage awaited the final trial, the moment when the boy who had fled to the caves would face the destiny that awaited him beyond the shadows. Chapter 11. The Burden of the Crown. The cavern's narrow passage finally opened into a vast chamber bathed in an ethereal glow, where ancient stones hummed with silent power older than time itself. This was no ordinary place. It was a sanctified space where destiny's weight pressed heavily on the soul of any who entered. David stepped cautiously forward, feeling the magnitude of the moment settle deep within his bones. At the chamber's center, an apparition shimmered into form, a figure robed in radiant light, neither fully human nor spirit, embodying the weight of centuries. The guardian of the threshold had faded, leaving instead a vision, an overwhelming presence that was not a guardian, but the very embodiment of kingship's burden. David, the voice echoed within the chamber, deep and resonant. To claim the crown is not to seize power for glory, but to bear a burden that few can endure. Look upon the future that awaits you, the path lined with triumphs and sacrifices alike. Before David's eyes, visions erupted like flames, illuminating the chamber with scenes of a kingdom rising from dust and sweat. He saw himself crowned king in the city of Jerusalem, his people's voices swelling in loyalty and praise. Yet, alongside the glory, shadows flickered, betrayals by trusted allies, wars that scarred the land, moments of solitude heavier than any armor. Faces appeared: Saul, the first king, proud and broken; Jonathan, loyal friend turned fading memory; Bathsheba, a name tied to both love and sorrow. David's own family flashed before him, sons torn by jealousy, daughters caught in the crossfire of fate. The vision did not shy away from the darkest truths: the anguish of decisions that cost lives, the loneliness of leadership, the heavy mantle of justice that must be balanced with mercy. The crown was a weight, cold and unyielding, that pressed upon his shoulders even before it rested upon his head. Yet amid the storm of images, a steady flame burned, a light of hope and faith that could never be extinguished. The promise of a kingdom ruled with righteousness, a legacy built not just on power, but on love and justice. The voice softened. Will you accept this burden, David? To rule not for yourself, but for the people? To carry the crown's weight with humility and courage? David's breath was steady. His eyes shone with resolve. I accept, not for glory or pride, but for the promise of my people and the will of the Lord. The chamber seemed to breathe with relief, the visions fading into a serene light that warmed the very air. The burden was heavy, but David's heart was steadfast. As he moved forward, the path beyond opened wide, leading him from the shadows of the cave into the dawn of his destiny. A destiny forged in sacrifice, shaped by faith, and destined to echo through the ages. Chapter 12. The Flames of Purification. As David emerged from the chamber of visions, the air around him shifted. The cave seemed to breathe with a new intensity, the shadows deepening, the silence charged with an electric hum. Ahead, a narrow corridor wound downward, leading to a place whispered among the ancients as the flames of purification, a sacred trial meant to cleanse the soul and steel the heart against the temptations of power. The path was treacherous, jagged stones jutting out like the teeth of some slumbering beast. David moved carefully, the glowing crystal from the spirit beast lighting his way. Every step brought a tightening in his chest, a mingling of fear and resolve. This trial was unlike any before, not a battle of strength or cunning, but a confrontation with the darkest parts of himself. At the corridor's end, David found an altar carved from the cave's living rock. Upon it burned a fire that shimmered with unnatural hues, blues and golds twisting like serpents in a sacred dance. The flames of purification. They were said to burn away impurity, forging the heart anew for those destined to lead. David approached and stretched out his hand, feeling the heat ripple through the air. He closed his eyes and summoned every memory, the victories and failures, the prayers whispered beneath the stars, the faces of those he loved and lost. The fire was a mirror, reflecting not only his strengths but also his flaws and fears. Suddenly, visions surged forth. Temptations of greed, pride, and vengeance flickered like shadows across his soul. The fire roared louder, demanding he confront them, not with denial, but with acceptance and resolve. "You are more than your fears," a voice echoed in the flames, "but only if you embrace your weaknesses and let them forge you." David's breath caught. He thought of Saul's downfall, a king undone by pride and envy. He thought of his own moments of doubt, the times he had stumbled yet risen again. With a fierce cry, he let the fire consume his doubts, not to destroy but to purify. The flames danced brighter, then calmed, leaving the altar glowing softly. David opened his eyes, feeling reborn, tempered by fire, his spirit sharper and his heart steadier. The path to the throne demanded not just courage, but humility and strength forged in truth. He stepped away from the altar, knowing the flames of purification had marked him as one who could bear the crown's true weight, not as a tyrant, but as a servant king. Beyond the fire, the cave's tunnels beckoned, leading him ever closer to the destiny that awaited outside, under the wide sky, where his people awaited their king. Chapter 13. The Echoes of Destiny. The cave's silence was profound as David moved forward, the weight of the trials behind him lingering like a shadow upon his spirit. Yet, ahead, a new challenge awaited, one not of flesh or fire, but of memory and fate. The echoes of destiny, whispered in ancient lore, were voices from the future reaching backward through time, calling the chosen to heed their purpose. The chamber he entered was vast and hollow, its walls alive with shimmering light that danced like starlight caught in a restless wind. Within this luminous expanse, David's heart began to beat in rhythm with the echoes that surrounded him. Soft murmurs, growing into voices, then into songs of triumph and sorrow interwoven across the tapestry of time. Visions came unbidden, a boy tending sheep, anointed by a prophet's hand, destined to unite a fractured nation. He saw battles waged with sword and spirit, cities risen and fallen, and a throne bathed in both glory and sacrifice. These echoes carried the weight of 1,000 years, voices of those who would follow and remember, weaving his name into the fabric of eternity. Yet amid the grandeur, shadows stirred, reminders that destiny was not a path of certainty, but a journey through storm and sacrifice. David saw friends turned foes, promises broken, and moments when faith alone would stand between salvation and ruin. The echoes sang of choices that could break or bind a king, and the fragile balance between mercy and justice. As the voices swelled, David felt the pulse of destiny rise within him, a flame ignited by hope and tempered by the knowledge of hardship. The echoes were not merely visions. They were a summons, a call to embrace his fate with courage and humility. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply as the voices wove around him like a cloak. "I hear you," he whispered, "and I will carry this destiny with all my heart, not for power or pride, but for the people and the promise of peace." The luminous chamber responded, the light growing warm and steady, as if the echoes themselves blessed his vow. David opened his eyes, heart steady, spirit prepared to face whatever the path ahead might hold. Beyond the chamber, the cave's mouth awaited, the passage to the world outside, where his destiny as king would begin in earnest, forged by the trials of the soul and the whispers of eternity. Chapter 14. The Shadow's Trial. As David pressed deeper into the cavern's heart, the air grew colder, heavy with an oppressive darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. This was the Shadow's trial, the final crucible before his emergence into destiny. It was not a battle of swords or beasts, but a test of the soul's resolve against despair, doubt, and the lure of shadowy power. The cavern walls pulsed with dark energy, swirling shadows coalescing into forms both terrifying and familiar. They whispered promises of glory without sacrifice, of a crown won through fear and dominance rather than honor. Yet beneath the enticing murmurs lay the chilling cost of such power, a soul consumed and a kingdom broken. David's heart thundered, but he stood firm, drawing upon every lesson learned in the cave's long journey. He called upon the faith that had sustained him through trials, the memory of those who had believed in him, and the vision of a just reign he vowed to uphold. Shadows surged forward, twisting into grotesque mirrors of his own fears and regrets. Failures that haunted his past, the faces of those he had lost or betrayed. The cave seemed to echo their voices, each one a dagger aimed at his resolve. But David raised his hand, the crystal amulet glowing with a fierce light. The darkness recoiled, hissing as the light pierced the gloom. "You do not have dominion over me," he declared, voice steady and commanding. "My strength comes not from fear, but from faith. Not from shadow, but from the light that guides me." The cavern shook as the shadows writhed and faltered. One by one, they dissolved into nothingness, leaving behind a radiant glow that bathed David in warmth and peace. The darkness had tested him, and he had not faltered. With the shadow's trial behind him, David felt a profound calm settle over his spirit. The cave's final test was complete. Ahead lay the opening to the world beyond, the place where his journey would transform from trial to triumph. Stepping forward, David breathed deeply the cool, fresh air of the cave's mouth. The first rays of dawn painted the horizon with gold and crimson. The kingdom awaited, and so did his destiny. Chapter 15, Dawn of the King. The first light of dawn broke over the horizon, spilling golden hues into the vast expanse beyond the cave's mouth. David stood at the threshold, the cool morning air brushing against his face, carrying the scent of earth, rain, and the promise of a new beginning. The long nights within the cave, filled with trials, visions, and battles of the spirit, had forged him anew. Now, the moment of destiny had arrived. Behind him, the shadows of the cave receded into silence, its secrets sealed once more beneath the ancient stones. Ahead lay the land of Israel, rugged hills, fertile valleys, and cities humming with the hopes and fears of its people. This was the kingdom he would lead, not as a conqueror driven by ambition, but as a shepherd guided by faith and love. David's gaze swept across the horizon, recalling the journey that had brought him here, the whispered prayers beneath the stars, the battles fought both within and without, the voices of the past echoing like a chorus in his heart. Each step through the cave had been a step closer to this moment, a trial preparing him for the crown he was destined to wear. Yet the crown was not merely a symbol of power. It was a mantle of responsibility, heavy with the weight of justice, mercy, and sacrifice. David felt that weight settle upon his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a sacred trust. The vision of his people came vividly to mind. Farmers tending their fields, children playing in the streets, elders sharing stories by the fire. They were the heart of the kingdom, the reason for his journey. His reign would be their shield and their hope. A breeze stirred, carrying the distant sound of a harp, gentle and haunting. It reminded David of the songs he had once sung as a boy, songs of praise and lament, of courage and faith. Music was the soul's voice, and he vowed to lead with a heart attuned to the hopes and sorrows of his people. With steady steps, David descended from the cave, each footfall echoing with purpose. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and enemies yet unseen. But his spirit was unyielding, forged in the fires of the cave, guided by the light of his calling. As the sun rose higher, bathing the land in warmth, David lifted his eyes to the heavens, whispering a prayer. "Let me be a king not of pride, but of justice. Let my reign bring peace to the broken and strength to the weary." The cave's secrets were behind him, but its lessons would live forever within. The journey of the soul was complete. Now began the true story, the story of a king destined to shape history, a man chosen to unite a nation, and a heart committed to the divine purpose that would echo through the ages. The dawn of the king had come.